All right, my friend, we are doing this. And I am so excited that you are having this conversation with me today, Amy. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. You're so sweet. I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
This is great. So, Amy recently posted something on LinkedIn, which we're going to get into in a little bit, but it was such a juicy area that I thought, you know what, this is a conversation. And I haven't talked to Amy in a while. So, great opportunity to reconnect just in general. But as I asked all my guests, Amy, is take us way back and tell us, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I love this question. So the real answer is I wanted to buy a monkey, train it to paint, and then I was going to sell the paintings for millions of dollars. That was what I wanted to
Okay,
do.
I have so many questions.
I know. My parents laugh about it all the time and they like to remind me. But like I was always in this like, oh, this is really cool and I could do this and I could make money here. And not that I was like money focused, but I was very much like encouraged by my parents to like discover what your talents are and then make a living out of that. And it became very clear early on that I loved to talk and I loved people. And my dad knew someone in actually the radio industry. And I played volleyball with his daughters, and he became my mentor. And so I went to school for business economics and communications. And so I actually, from like college, I was really interested in getting into radio because I was taught you get to be with people all day. You don't have to sit behind a desk, and you can make great money. And so I had to let my dreams go of selling $1 million paintings of from my pet monkey and go into more of like a traditional role. But I just was always really interested in audio, and I loved radio, and I loved the connection that I had with the jocks. And so um, I would say I was a little fortunate to kind of understand what path I wanted to go down from an early
Yeah, I mean,
stage.
that's uncommon to know that early and stay with it, right? Sometimes we know we
Yeah.
try it and then we pivot, but that's really amazing that you knew. But wait, I want to go back to the monkey for a second. Was it, if you can remember back, was it more about your interest in animals, your interest in art, or the interest in like putting two disparate things together and creating something new? Like, do you remember?
I just thought, well, first of all, I was like fascinated with monkeys. Like we went to the zoo, or no, we were at the fair and there was like a monkey with a diaper on it. I was like dying. I was like, I have to take a picture of the monkey, and my mom had it on her keychain for, I'm not kidding, it was like 15 years, this picture of me when I was like 7. And and it was just like I loved the idea of like, well, how can I make money from that? And I thought, oh, this would be so cool. And then years later, I actually saw something about like an elephant. I was like, dang it, maybe I should have gone for my
Oh, I
original
think I
dream.
saw that elephant holding the paintbrush with the
Yeah,
trunk. Right, there you
yes,
go.
yeah.
Amazing,
Oh,
amazing. Um, so when you think about that trajectory and then studying communications and business in school, you've mentioned that you had this mentor, a friend of your father's. So how did that result in your first job? What happened then?
well, I went to school at Westmont, which is in Santa Barbara, and I sort of had like quote unquote made a deal with my parents. Like if I graduated a semester early, like could you pay for my trip to Europe? And they're like, yes, let's do it. I was like, amazing. So I took summer school and I got all my credits. And then I graduated a semester early, didn't really want to get into business or a quote unquote real job yet. So I went and worked at Nordstrom's and still living with my college friends. And then what happened was this woman comes into Nordstrom's and she's flustered, and she's like, I have to be in an event in 45 minutes. I need an outfit, I need jewelry, I need shoes, I need all these things. And I was like, all right, we got you, girl. And the AC was down. And so she's in the dressing room and I'm throwing
Like
clothes for
schwitzing.
her. Yeah. And I had the guys like bring in a fan for her, and then I'm running downstairs getting her jewelry and shoes options. And so she's out the door in like 35 minutes. And she's standing there and she's like, I really like you. What are you doing working at Nordstrom? And I was like, well, and I told her the story. And she's like, I run Santa Barbara Magazine. And would you be interested in coming in? And it's like a high gloss, high luxury magazine in town. And So I went in for an interview and she was running circulation at the time. And, I think a few weeks later, I was hired as the quote unquote circulation manager, and which was really a glorified secretary of that office, like that ran the office. But there was this particular program within that job that was selling to realtors
Mm.
subscriptions that they could send to their clients. And so I found a way to kind of take a kind of seemingly boring job and find like, oh, this is really cool. I get to stand in front of these realtors and pitch this thing. And so I really liked it, and still was in contact with my mentor. And he actually recommended go into media somewhere, not radio, learn that. Um, I also worked as an intern in college for an advertising agency. And I knew quickly, which is great about internships, you can find out what you like and also, more importantly, what you don't like. And I knew I didn't want to be on the agency side. And so I was there for just a little over a year, and I talked to them. They're like, like, you've done a great job. And I said, I have this other opportunity. So I left my $22,000 a year job in Santa Barbara and started working 100% commission selling air, and I worked and I got a job at Clear Channel, Santa Barbara. And that was almost 20 years ago.
And what a tremendous leap to go from a consistent paycheck to 100% commission.
Yeah, it was like a draw against commission, and it was like
Okay.
barely going to cover, and then you had to pay all that money back, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you got to really, one, believe in yourself, and
Yes.
then also believe in what you're selling. That has always been at the core. And it's something that I also learned through internships and various jobs. And I used to work at a surf shop in Newport Beach in high school and during the summers in college. And I managed a surf shop at like 17 years old. And I realized through all of my little jobs and meeting these different managers, what takes a good manager versus not a great manager. And just the respect was like, I always have to work for people that I respect. That was
Mm.
like a early thing that I established. And then also I have to believe in what I'm doing, or like, what's the point?
Right.
There's this, you'll burn out the altruistic nature of like wanting to do something for, like, wait, I can help people. And, like, that's kind of hard to find in advertising. And so I have just really believed in what I'm selling, and then I see the successes, and it's kept me there. Clear Channel, now iHeart, for a very long time because of those core pieces. Mhm.
Yeah. Interesting. Um, what was more challenging than you thought it would be during that time?
I think, I mean, one of the best things learning and challenging, because I think it goes hand in hand, right? You learn from your challenges in those times, is, just knowing hard work and putting the time in, but how important follow up is. Do what you say you're going to do. When you are working on commission and you let the ball drop, that's money out of your pocket,
Yeah.
right? And so I learned a great deal of staying organized, being on top of your projects. I mean, and this was not a glorified, I was selling $50 radio spots, walking into the local florist, or walking into the nightclub in the middle of the day, which no one should ever be in the nightclub with carpet on the floor, to pick up a check, right? Because
Yeah.
they didn't pay their bill, I didn't get paid. And
Right.
so I look back and go, I love that I did those things, like cold call sheets, and walking into car dealers saying, I talked to your GM. And so I look at that as like, it was challenging in terms of just, I guess you could say, like, inspiring to get out there and just do the work.
Mhm.
And then you see, oh, I'm making really good connections, and I'm I really like the people I'm working with and my clients now. And then it becomes this like very fruitful, giving back. And obviously it's fun to like make some coin on that
Yeah,
good
sure.
side, but yeah, I learned a lot in those early years for sure. Mhm.
Okay. So, Clear Channel, was there a role after Clear Channel? or that?
So I was in Santa Barbara. My husband and I got married. I think I'd only been there maybe 2 years, year and a half at that time. And he is a music producer, and we just realized like, what's our future in Santa Barbara? Like, I was not making a ton of money at all, even close. And he was working odd jobs, and he was in a band. And we're like, I think we need to move to LA. Like, I think that's what we need to do for our careers. And I think at that time, like the medium home price was $1 million in Santa
Mm,
Barbara. So now it's much more.
sure.
But so I talked to my boss, and I said, I'd love to look into transferring to LA. And he was such a support and
Mm,
was like, you would kill it there. The only difference is you add a couple of zeros. Like, you got this. And
nice.
so he set up, some like, and honestly, it happened so fast that for the first 2 weeks of my job, I was commuting from Santa Barbara to Burbank. And I started working at a single station in LA. I was working for Coast 103.5. And it was when individual sales teams ran one particular station. And
Okay.
so that was my second job sort of there. And then they re totally restructured the sales team and created a cluster team. And I was asked to join that. So then there was this other move along the way. And then, after that, it became like an agency team. And then I
Mm,
joined that. And so there was a lot of support within LA, and I would say within the company, of like, let's advance the right salespeople in the right roles. And then about, gosh, like 11 years ago, I moved over to what it was called at the time Connections, which is a national sales team that calls on the top 200 accounts. And it was the best move I could have made. I'm agnostic across our platform, and so it was a great move. So I always say I've been there for a long time, but I've had 8 different jobs along the way.
right. Right.
But a lot of different divisions and a lot of different managers. Mhm.
Well, yeah, because if you add your clear channel time, and then of course, for our listeners, iHeart owns Clear Channel now. So was it a straight through, or did um
No, it was the straight
straight through?
through. So
So 20 some odd years within the family.
yeah, so Clear Channel actually, Clear Channel Outdoor still exists, but Clear Channel, we changed our name once we launched iHeartRadio, the app, many years ago. The next evolution was leaving the Clear Channel name and becoming iHeartMedia. So I have worked, I think June was my 19th year. So next year will be 20 years. But I like to say that, because I mentor a couple young girls, and I do say it's like, look for opportunities within your organization. Learn from other people, ask questions, be inquisitive, and do good work.
Mhm.
I mean, we have sort of 3 key pillars that I share with my team. Is your job is to drive revenue, number one. 2 is do good work, and then the third is don't ruin it for everybody else. And it's important to like be on top of it. Don't throw your work at someone else. Be the lead, be organized, because like that's just going to help you and your clients and your campaigns be really successful.
I mean, such amazing advice for people, especially to have a leader. Because I think, like you said, when you were working in the surf shop and seeing what you liked about certain bosses and others, I mean, I think that the challenge we often have is that people are subject matter experts. They get elevated, but they're not necessarily trained on how to develop someone else or how to mentor someone else so that they can also become successful. So the fact that you're doing that, again, is just a testament to your excellence of what you're doing. And again, as a coach, you know me, I love that part. Um,
Love it.
my question then around that would be, you are now in Nashville, still with iHeart, and you're managing, you're remote, but there's a mixture of remote and also in the office teams. And what are you seeing as some of the ways in which you're working with your fellow leaders to bring people together? Because those become almost two cultures then.
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, so I run the automotive, like the National Automotive team. We verticalized a few years back, and That was one of the things I raised my hand and I said, I want that job. And here's why I'm good for it. Can we talk about it? And it felt like a very natural next step because I was definitely focused more on automotive and tier one. To answer your question, like it's a challenge, because now I'm managing a team that's New York, Detroit, and LA, and I'm in Nashville. And, I mean, like starting next week, I'm traveling for 5 weeks straight, to see all the different markets. What I like to do is be sure, like, we have regular calls, but again, nobody wants to sit on Zoom all day, and team calls. So I limit our internal meetings where we get together as a team every 2 weeks. But really, it's about driving collaboration. It's share your successes, share your materials. Like if, like we can learn if one campaign worked really well because these were the things that we added to it, it only helps us if we share and collaborate. So culture is a big thing for me. I know we're all competitive in nature. I love it when you're competitive with yourself and not so much competitive with your coworkers. Like that doesn't fit for me. And so that has been a huge spark where I love it that my team is talking and learning from each other and sharing materials, and I'm not involved, right? Yeah. Like they're doing it on their own. We are trying to get together for in Vegas in September. The iHeartMedia Music Festival is happening out there, and it's like this is a really great time for us to get back together. So we try to do at least once a year. We're all in person, and then there's various like events where half the team's together, and the other half gets together in a couple of months. But it's challenging, and I'm constantly asking myself how to create more of that team, culture when you're stretched out across the country in this new normal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it is. And what I'm seeing from my point of view is often there's the group of people that were hired pre-COVID and there were people that were hired during COVID. So it ends up being two separate cultures because some people may never actually physically been in proximity to each other and won't be depending on where their locale is. So finding ways and working with team dynamics and creating strength-based cultures are all the ways in which, again, if a company is having, a hybrid structure, how you work within that. So yeah, I've seen that. And again, as someone who has been fortunate enough because of working with you across the automotive category and some of the others being able to go to some of those iHeart events and festivals, the one in Vegas, the country festival was my favorite. In Austin, at least that's where you were hosting it back then, which is amazing, amazing. So I want to jump into what you posted on the article that you shared on LinkedIn, recently. And it was a media post. I'll drop it in the link for anyone who's interested, but it was a mediapost.com article around, the title was Humility, the Lost Superpower and How We Can Bring It Back. And, it just got you and I talking about this idea, and, quoting some of the things that you said is that humility doesn't mean that you're not confident. It's about understanding how to sort of do that dance of like knowing where you're strong and knowing where it's time to learn versus affirm and having that balance. But I'd love for you to talk a bit about like what struck you about that article and why you shared it. And then of course you've got a lot of, people commenting and jumping on it too. So if you could share a little bit of that with us.
Yeah, I just loved the thought of if we all are operating that we know everything, we will never learn, right? And our hopefully our goal is to get better as people and individuals professionally and personally. And I think, major disclaimer, I don't think anyone is an expert in humility. And I think sometimes it's the reason we don't talk about it because no one wants to be a hypocrite. And so it is an awkward conversation to have and go like, I think this is really important because I struggle with that balance consistently. And when the right time to, as a manager and a leader, lead from this is what we're doing, but how do you show confidence and humility at the same time? And sometimes I'm really good at it, and sometimes I'm really bad at it. And I think if it's more just being self-aware, I think emotional intelligence is the key of this whole conversation, and I think depending on, and I've heard this from clients and other people in other industries that work at other companies, but if we have a gotcha culture, then it really is difficult to show humility. So making sure that culture is breeding, like, we want feedback. One of my old bosses, Tim Castelli, would say, and we always would laugh, like, feedback is a gift, and sometimes feedback hurts, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
But we also need to be okay asking for feedback.
Yes.
Like, I think sometimes we just get feedback and it can kind of feel like a little kind of uncomfortable. But if
Mhm.
you're going into that with an open mind of, hey, I'm going to take feedback because I want to learn from it, then you're just going to be a better person. I
Yeah.
mean, at the end of the day, like, work aside, like, it's going to make you a better person that people just want to be around, you know?
Yes. Yes.
And you brought up like the confidence and humility. And I used to say, like, well, life is a balance, right? And I've been playing with this. I have two children, and sometimes I feel like I'm on it, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I feel like I'm letting people down, and sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm super mom. But I don't think it's necessarily a balance as it is a flow. You're going to flow in one direction and then the other, and just being self-aware of when you need to start flowing back the other way. um, I think humility too is such a superpower in difficult, hard conversations.
Yeah.
I've talked to my team about this, and we've, like, actually, like, I've role played this with a couple that are like, hey, I'm not getting along with this person, and I'm just getting no's. How do I have this conversation? And what I have shared with them is, reach out to them directly. Don't do an email. Don't do a Teams chat.
Tone and email and text or team, it cannot be determined. Yes.
No, absolutely. Pick up the phone and talk to them. But start it as, we're just not we're just not connecting and working well together. And I know you feel it, but I want to hear how I can do a better job and be a better, like, right hand person, or whatever your role is with this person. Like, how can I communicate better? Or is there something that, like, is bothering you that I need to know about? And all of a sudden, it takes their defensiveness just down, right? You're
Mhm.
asking them, like, I care about your feelings. I want us to get through this. And then the other side too is, once they kind of air this, is repeat it back to them.
Yes.
So this
Yes.
is what I hear you're saying. You're saying,
Yes.
like, I'm throwing things at you, and I'm throwing you on calls, and I'm not prepping you ahead of time. You don't feel like I'm respecting your time. This just
I'm
is
not providing context for
yeah,
why I need you there, all those things. Sure.
absolutely. And then all of a sudden it goes down again. And then you can have a really constructive conversation.
Yeah.
So approaching it from, like, a humility side of, like, I care about you. I want this to work out. We both want to do a great job, but, like, tell me what I can do better.
Mhm.
And then at that point, I feel like they're also open, and they're seeing it by example. Because I think humility, you learn by seeing it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't necessarily come natural to, I would
Yeah.
say, 99.9% of people.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that you touched on that I want to drive home. Again, this is the coach in me.
I
Is
love
that
it.
on the idea? I mean, you can Google the definition of humility, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about having a modest or low view of one's importance. That's not what we're talking
Mhm.
about here.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is the understanding of self-awareness. And what you said, Amy, which I think is so important, is that it starts with emotional intelligence, which is the self-awareness, having empathy, understanding your own motivations, and to the best of your ability, asking questions to understand the motivations of your teammates and the people or your clients, or, the people that you're working with. It's also having self-regulation. It's understanding that at times, I need to lean back a little bit, or I need to lean in. Maybe this, one of the things that I love to say to clients is, there's a little expression of, does it need to be said? Does it
Yeah.
need to be said by me? And does it need to be said by me right now? Right?
Mhm.
You follow that, you can do a little quick point. Another one is like, how important is this going to be in 2 hours, 2 weeks, 2 months, and 2 years? Again, really
Absolutely.
quick frameworks to self-regulate. And then again, the social skills. Um, I've been fascinated over, especially throughout COVID and post-COVID, Again, there'll be studies for the end of time as what it's done to children and people in school and all the above. But the inability of social skills to hold space for someone and what I mean by that is when someone's talking, just pause. You don't need to be thinking about the smart thing you're going to say next, giving them space to say it, actually listening to them. Um, don't step on people, noticing when we're all in the Zoom room or the Teams meeting that there's someone who's been trying to break in and keeps getting stepped on. You can create a space by saying, like, Amy, I noticed you were trying to say something. Did you want to get in there? Like, if you have the floor for the moment, creating that for others. So I think that part about the emotional intelligence part is so important. The other thing that you said, which I love, and it made me think of the 4 A's. And I don't mean the Advertising Association about, I don't mean that 4 A's. I mean, it's a 4 A's framework for giving feedback. And I think it's really important because it is at times gender normative for females to receive the feedback and not be sure how to ascertain whether it's feedback or criticism. And I'm going to make it really easy for you. If the feedback is do it like me, it's criticism. If the feedback is tangible, actionable, and it's aimed at something that you can actually, do it like that because it'll have an outcome, then it's feedback. And again, you still get to decide whether or not you're going to accept it or toss it. But if it's coming from a peer or a client or a supervisor in some way, having the idea that you're using that 4 A's, and that's aim it, right? So when you're giving feedback, you're aiming it specifically. When you're giving the feedback, you're also making it actionable, where, spending years in advertising industries and agencies and having at times clients say like, yeah, I just don't like it. And you're like, okay, but why? And they're like, I don't know. Like, I just don't like it. And you're like, okay, I don't know what to do with the feedback.
That's
Right.
not
So you
actionable.
need to give me something actionable there, right? So that's the way you give feedback, is you aim it specifically and you make it actionable. And then the last 2 A's are, appreciate it. And what I mean by appreciate it is you don't have to like it, but you could appreciate that someone had the emotional intelligence to tell you something and say it in a way that was kind, because clear is kind, and we're moving it forward versus like not telling you. Like, wouldn't you want to know if you were stepping in something and like having that bit of feedback? And then the last A is, again, either accept it or discard it. So it's aim it, make it actionable. That's how you give feedback. And the way you receive feedback is you appreciate what it took to get you that feedback, and then you either accept it or toss it out. So I love that you touched on this. And again, the coach in me is always going to bring it back to the executive coaching of how do we make this actionable? But it's really, it's super impressive that you're doing this in your organization and, helping leaders move forward in how they're doing their own self-development.
Well, I just wrote down all of the A's. So I'm going to make sure that I'm following this, because I think part of like humility is knowing like, I didn't do that well. And then just not letting it go, making sure you follow up and say, hey, I just want to revisit that conversation, and making sure like, because we can recognize when we don't, handle something perfectly, and which we oftentimes don't. But you hit on a couple of things of like when to lean in and when to lean back. That has been a struggle for me, going from a direct, contributor to now being in a management position. And I don't know if you follow Adam Grant organization.
I was on his podcast.
What? How did I know? Okay. Well, now I'm going to go first, but I just adore him. I love him. I love the topics he talks about. And he was sitting with who's it? What's her name?
Brene Brown.
Brene Brown.
And Simon Sinek. They did a little try.
They talked about, I thought I loved the conversation. I got so much from it. But one of the things that they talked about was being like an external thinker. And he had some, it's all it is talking out or thinking out loud. I am not. I think out loud. And so I have told my team and say like, I might be thinking out loud. That is not the end all be all. Like, this is a brainstorm. And I now have to like literally put myself on mute, because I don't want to dominate or just not leave space. And I've learned to like reach out and be like, well, what do you think about this, as being like the digital expert on the team? Or what do you think about this? Because all your historical on the client, or what other ideas can we bring to the table? And And so self-awareness again comes into play. Like I think out loud and I need to pull back on that and make sure I'm holding space for others to come in. The other thing you mentioned was like the kindness of, being direct.
That's a
And
Brene Brown, my friend. Clear is
uh
kind,
yeah.
unclear is unkind. That's
So
our
I
friend.
I don't even know that. And I said to my team, and I maybe like through the years, like that has come into my psyche, but I've said, I will always give direct feedback, but know there is positive intent.
Yes.
Like that is at the core. Like I just want to have you kill it and have us do great work. And so I just want you to know if I ever come across very direct, just know it's coming from a very positive place. But I might change it up and just like, do the B'nai and because clear is
Clear
kind
is kind,
is
unclear is
yeah,
unkind.
it's such a good
Yeah.
thing. And I think, and not to make
And
it
that's
about a
not
gender.
permission to be a jerk or
No.
to be cruel. It's just what I always say to people, especially if you're using that clear as kind, is separate story from fact.
Mm,
What are the facts? The kindness comes from stating the facts. Your opinion, you're entitled to it, of course. But again, that's not a fact. That's your opinion. You
and
may be
also,
the leader. You may be the in charge. It may ultimately be your decision. I'm not taking any of that away from you. I'm saying again, it comes back to what I said before is how do you create space for people so that they can express or share an idea and not get stepped on? And then you again, as the leader, get to decide again on the feedback piece, you get to accept it or discard it.
yeah. And it doesn't lack emotion, right? Like
Correct.
you can still state the facts and but you don't want to be overly emotional about it. And so I know like if something is really upsetting me, I have someone that I can talk to that's sort of removed from that situation. And I can be like, this is really bothering me. Talk me through this. Like having those people that you work with that can also help you kind of
Process
define
it.
what's story and fact is
Right.
really key. And that's helped me is like, listen, am I reading this the right way? Again, that's a way to show humility
Mhm.
within the organization of like,
That you're not
I
always
have
right.
I have to take a step back here. I'm not
Yes.
right, or I'm being overly emotional about this. Or, I just need help guiding myself. But
Yeah.
I think,
And we all come to everything in life with our own prejudice and bias. It's impossible not to. So
yes.
knowing when you need to check your bias and,
Mhm.
creating that space to be like, okay, how can I think about this differently? You may still come back with, no, I know in my heart of hearts that this is my gut and this is the right way to proceed with this topic at hand or how to achieve this goal. Great. But at least you gave yourself a beat to
Yeah.
actually have a moment of humility to say, like, is there another way of thinking about
And
this?
learning what people can, what everyone communicates differently. And there's sometimes like I've learned over the past couple of years is like, I can be direct with this person. I can't be as direct with this person.
Right.
And so I'm going to change my communication style with that person so that we just have a great working relationship. We're still getting to the end. We're still accomplishing our goals, but I'm going to, it's like match your audience, match the tone, match like all of those things that we know in like a presentation, but you also can apply those matching tone, matching communication styles
Yes.
within an organization.
Yeah. There's a man I used to work with who had this masterful way of if you were animated and high energy and emotional, he would bring himself down and be cool and calm. And if you were too cool and calm, he would show up with the energy and
Mm,
watching him. And I eventually talked to him about it and he was like, oh, it was years of training, but he
oh,
learned how to manage his mind and therefore modulate and self-regulate his behavior, which, like we said, emotional intelligence, where it spills into also your executive presence. I mean, what I'm also seeing and hearing a lot is people are expressing themselves in a way in which others can't hear them because there's like a tinge of passive aggressive or a little bit of anger in it. And it's like, no one can hear you through that. So how do you separate again, story from fact, get clear, self-regulate, and then figure out again, whether you need a mentor or a coach, however you need to work through it.
mhm.
But if you're ineffective in your communication, you're not going to reach your goal.
Yeah.
It's
And
as
I was very fortunate growing up that, I have two amazing parents. Actually, are celebrating 50 years of marriage next month. And
Oh,
they are really great communicators. And a lot of the things that I've learned in like personal relationships that I think apply really well to professional relationships is the asking questions, humility, active listening, all of those things. And they were uh, marriage counselors for
oh,
many years
wow.
in their church, and they would literally be tied to a newly married couple and follow them like and meet with them for the first year of their relationship. And it was like
Amazing.
amazing to see also like just generosity and all of these other amazing traits and time and also they were never like, we're not the experts in marriage, but we've been married a very long time, and so experience comes with some
Right,
like
right.
really great recommendations of how to work
Yeah.
through. And I think conflict resolution is super super key in a romantic relationship,
Yeah.
and if you
And a
make mistakes,
professional like that,
and a
that
professional.
often, when I meet with clients privately, they'll say, we may start with talking about a peer or a colleague or a client in which they're trying to improve the relationship. And then
Mm,
at some point, inevitably, they're like, this stuff actually works with my spouse too. And I'm like, oh, because it's a
okay.
relationship.
Yeah, for sure. But like I've been really blessed to have amazing clients that I've built great relationships. But there's been times I can't break down whatever prejudice is there. And for me, I know when I'm being like not emotionally intelligent is when I care too much about what people think.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you are into the Enneagram, but I'm a 3 and it's an achiever. And so like I know when I'm an unhealthy 3, I care too much about what people think about me. So I tried to have these like direct conflict resolutions, but then also knowing I'm not going to change someone's mind, I don't think. And
Yeah.
so I've gone to my bosses and been like, I'm not the right person for this account.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not
Which
me.
requires
And
humility, emotional intelligence, executive presence to know that you're saying, you know what, I need additional support or someone else needs to be on point for this. And you're not walking in there thinking that you did something wrong or you're being weird and being like, I'm going to get in trouble. It's a delicate balance that we continually have to work through.
I
Um,
think when you can show like your peers or your bosses that you're not the right person for everything, or you don't always have the best idea. You can't be the best at everything.
you
I
can't be the
mean,
best at everything.
and also like I know I am not the center of the universe. Like that is very clear. And I see it every day.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but I think that actually builds respect. I think
It
when you show
totally does.
humility, there is a respect that is gained, and that's why I do think like that this article just hit me for like one particular reason is like, wow, like the amount of, if we can bring and encourage humility in all of our work and in our workplaces or and at home and all of these places, there's going to be this respect and this like almost as a reaction, this like generosity and active listening and care and like all these things can really take place after someone really shows that, like that superpower of humility.
Yeah. I mean, I love the way you summed that up because I think when we're thinking about how we want to show up at work, I often make the joke to my clients that think about if you were dating someone at some point, think about if you showed up at a party or an event or a bar and the first person you walked into, you were talking all about yourself and how it was all about you, you're not going to be attracting, right? People are going to be like, oh, okay, you're weird, right? And that can also come through even in looking for jobs, whether it's internal promotions or external promotions, where if you're graspy, we've all interviewed people who on paper, their resume is outstanding. And then when we meet them, we're like, I can't put my finger on it. There's something here. And these are the things that, again, we tend to ladder up to executive presence. But often when people can't break through to get the promotion, to nail the client deal, right? Or get the job, these are the things. It's not about your expertise or your subject matter expertise or your resume. It's usually about how you're showing up. And if you don't have that self-awareness or a friend, a loved one, a mentor, a coach to say, listen,
Yeah.
right? It's like
Absolutely.
clear as kind again. Uh,
Um, are you familiar with Donald Miller and his book, Building Your Story Brand?
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So that is, like a perfect example of like when now we're talking about like pitching. So we're pitching a client. When you make it about you, and they don't care. Like they do not care. And so we've really flipped this in the last few years because of like start with the client. They're the hero of the story. You're a guide, but illustrate the challenges, internal, external. Show your expertise by understanding where they are and they sit because you've done your homework, you've had lots of conversations, and you can come in and illustrate how doing whatever you're pitching is going to lead to them overcoming these internal and external challenges. And so I absolutely 100%. If you start with you, you're going to lose your audience, whether it's dating or pitching or any of those things. And I think on the media platform side, I think our industry is so like almost attuned to like, well, we got to tell them we're the best, and we got to tell them this. Like, but what's in it for the brand? What's in it
right.
for your client? Like, so really flipping that, is, by the way, shows empathy, it shows humility, it shows all of those things, and also you're giving them valuable insights and research and all of these things before you even get to how you're overcoming their challenges and how
Yes.
like a great marketing campaign can do that. So
Exactly. Exactly.
it's exciting to encourage that mindset and think high level about a client before you start talking
Yeah.
about yourself.
Yeah. I also think it's exciting. Again, you're a leader at one of the top media companies in the world. I think it's also exciting that we're bringing in ideas and best practices from what we know about human behavior, like psychology and human behavior, into the marketing, consultative selling and sales process, right? Not to be manipulative. We're not trying to get one
Oh,
over on you, but we're trying to really create that strategic connection. Is that when I really have done my research and know everything I can know without being creepy, but knowing everything I can by like reading your website, looking at your LinkedIn profile. This is not the time to go after someone's Facebook or their Instagram. Stay away from those, stay into the public domain. Is their bio on the company website? What do we know in the press? And really doing that research and therefore coming and thinking of thoughtful questions to ask them
right.
so that they can
Absolutely.
talk more, so that they're talking first is across the board, whether it's a client or a colleague. It's the way you create and deepen those relationships and really show up with that higher level of emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. And bringing the value. What are you bringing to the table as a strategic partner, as a thought leader? Like what things, like whether they go for it or not, what did you bring to the table that go, hey, it didn't work out this time, but man, I loved it that they brought this, and this to me. And it made me really think about this for future. And also saying, if I cannot be valuable to you, that's okay. We can work on something else together down the road. But you're not the right fit for everyone and for every KPI. And, so really saying, I really believe in this because it is important to you. And this is why. And that's the other thing. Always make sure you have a why. Why are we doing this? Why does it matter? And so that it's not just about a tactic, it's about what we're doing and why we're here and what it's going to end up doing. So
Right.
I absolutely agree. When you come in as a thoughtful, strategic leader, it matters and it shows and you'll
And it
stand out.
shows. And I'll also say, just for our listeners, I was on the agency media side. Amy, of course, was on the media platform and partner side. And to her point, she wasn't always the right KPI, even though she works for an amazing company who has amazing products to offer clients. But my trust in her, my understanding of her strategic prowess and what she's bringing to the table, it meant like, I mean, I don't know, we could probably do the math. I think I've known you 20 years. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
great. So what does it do? It's like wherever I go next, whatever you do next, it's also about building that relationship that I'm always going to take your call. I'm always going to have a conversation with you because I know that you're respectful and you're not making it about you personally. You're making it about the shared value or the shared end goal. And I think that that's a major part, that when we're not currently working with each other in close proximity, like we're mammals, right? We need to like touch and shake hands. And right, when we're not in close proximity, these are some of the nuances that start to fall away. And why I think there's conflict at times that doesn't necessarily have to be there because we're not coming together in ways. And these are the ways to get around it.
No, I absolutely agree. And that is so kind of you. And I really appreciate that. And sitting with thoughtful people that have such like, I mean, you're such a natural coach. Like, it's like, I mean, do you feel that you have like kind of really found your thing? I mean, because you were so incredibly strategic in your other roles and really thoughtful and really had always a really strong vision. And like, that was, by the way, very actionable and like appreciated to like use 2 of your A's. But also, I mean, can you hear me?
Oh, now you're back. Sorry, we just
Oh,
lost you for a second. That's okay.
but do you feel like in this role that you've sort of like found like, oh man, this is bringing all of my experience into this like amazing place? How do you feel about that?
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I mean, this work is a ministry to me. And what I mean by that is I first became certified as a coach in '07, I believe, and I was still working in major corporate roles, but I was using it for personal development. And then, of course, such a fan and a proponent of team development. I'm working with my teams and then seeing the actions and reactions and tangible results of when people were having coaching type mindset and strength-based cultures infused into departments and seeing the difference in performance. Like
Mm.
HR would be like, what's going on? Like, and it's like, well, one, I'm not an asshole. And two, I'm really, on top of liking what I do, I'm helping people develop themselves. So absolutely. I mean, I think that getting to sit in this place, the idea of infusing strategy within your job, your story, and the career that you want to create, to me, just felt like a very natural next space for myself. So I thank you for acknowledging that, because
I
yeah,
love that.
it's definitely what kind of gets me out of bed in the morning, and what I've
Ah,
been able to do now full time for the last 7 years, which is like, sometimes I'm also like, whoa, most small businesses don't last past a year. And I'm in my 7th year of self-employment and consultancy work. And it's amazing. Yeah. So
that
thank
is
you.
so incredible and so inspiring of like taking a leap because sometimes you can feel stuck, right? Like
Yeah.
I've been here for so long and
Or you want to vomit.
yeah, you're just like, I can't do this anymore. I've lived my professional career as, be content, but not complacent. And when I start to feel complacent, that's when I know I need to shake things up. And ironically enough, it's been within one organization for a very long time. And I've had paths, but it being complacent is just the work. Like, talk about why people are burning out. They feel complacent, they don't like it, they work for an asshole. Like, but
Right.
if you're not content and find joy in your work, like, don't be afraid to look around and make a huge leap. I mean, that's a big leap that you made, but you took 20 years of experience and
Yeah.
you're rolling it all into one. And it's
What?
incredible. It's very fun.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay. I'm going to ask you one last question. And that is, what book or podcast are you reading, or have you recently experienced that you would recommend the audience that they should check out?
Okay, I'm looking over at my bookshelf. So I love Adam Grant. That is my like work life is like my favorite podcast. So I'm constantly digging in to that. And then, because I sell podcasts, I have to listen to all these other podcasts. So I'm not, I listen to podcasts to learn. And we actually see that like 74% of people actually tune into a podcast to learn something, which I think is really exciting. So I would say podcast wise, Adam Grant. And I mentioned that Donald Miller book, which I thought is incredible, but there's a book called Connecting with Clients.
Hmm.
And it was written by an agency guy in Australia. And it's a super easy read, but it really talks about it's from the creative agency or the media agency to their clients, but it's incredibly applicable for whether you're a seller or on the media platform side or on the agency side. And it's a great read. And it's not chapters, you can go to quick topics, but it's fantastic. So I would recommend it.
Great.
I'm
So I'm going to
almost
put all
done.
of that. I'm going to put Adam Grant work, life, story, brand. The 4 A's framework is from a book, which I'm spacing on right now, but I'll drop it in the framework so everyone can read more about that, because it's brilliant work. And also the article that got all of this started on
Yeah.
humility. So
And
Amy, thank you so much.
I'll send you the link for the connecting with clients
Oh
book
yeah,
too.
perfect. And we'll drop that in the show notes too.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate, I mean, I know we're all super busy, but you are especially busy with your remit. So I really appreciate you taking the
Oh,
time to share your
it
experience. And
was so fun. It was so
yeah,
fun. And I loved our conversation. I think the more we talk about these things, like, it's inspiring for me to talk about it. And so I hope people get inspired just listening. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on. And it was wonderful to see you. And I can't wait to keep connecting along the way.
thank you, Amy. So everyone, as always, if you have any questions, you want to hit a question and ask Amy up a question, you can always email me at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. We will get those. We will maybe even do a follow-up episode of FAQs if they come out, if you have any questions. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you soon. Bye.